Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for your attendance. I'd like to open with a comment. For the record, spending under Justin Trudeau's government on outside consultants and contracts has more than doubled, costing taxpayers $20 billion. And now we have a classic example of government waste and abusing the taxpayer. So I'm going to focus my questions to you, Ms. Jeffrey. You mentioned in the earlier rounds that ultimately you report to Minister Hajdu at the time during the implementation of the ArriveCan app. She was your direct minister. And you also reported to the PCO, the Privy Council Office. Is that correct?
Yes, the role of the President of the Public Health Agency of Canada.
Yeah, and directly reporting to the PCO is the clerk of the Privy Council is who you'd be reporting to, correct?
For the purposes of the administration of the public service.
Right. But during the course of the ArriveCan implementation, you were reporting to the Privy Council office. And you are aware that the Privy Council office literally acts as a deputy minister for the Prime Minister. Is that correct?
The Public Health Agency functions as part of a health portfolio.
I'm not asking you about that, ma'am. I'm asking you about the structure of the Privy Council office. That's the question. And would you agree with me that that really acts as a deputy minister to the Prime Minister?
Yes, that's one of the functions.
Thank you. Now, I want to know, without getting into specifics, I want to know about all the contacts, whether they be telephone, whether they be email, whether they be in person, all the contacts that you had with both Minister Hajdu and the clerk of the Privy Council during the implementation of the ArriveCan app. So how frequently, let's start with the Minister Hajdu, how frequently were you consulting with her and informing her about the implementation of the app?
So I would just clarify that it would be the role of the President of the Public Health Agency, since I've been in the role for 1 year, so not me personally. However, there was structured COVID governance focused on the measures that were being taken at the border. So here I want to distinguish.
Again, I'm not talking, ma'am, the question is very specific. I'm not talking about content. I'm talking about frequency. So whether you were in the role as the president or the deputy minister at all relevant times or another colleague, how often were you consulting, telephone, email, meetings with Minister Hajdu during the implementation of the app, but specifically the 177 versions of the app is the question. Can you provide an answer to that, please?
As it regards to the response to the COVID pandemic, the President of the Public Health Agency would have been in very frequent contact. I can't give a specific number, but in terms of the overall health response, the orders in council that developed the measures at the border, there was established governance that has been publicly disclosed.
Now let's move on to the PCO. Same question, frequency. How often?
There were regular committees and governance structures that met about the COVID response.
Okay. And clearly you were not sharing with either Minister Hajdu or the clerk of the Privy Council all of the failings that the Auditor General has identified. Were you?
The responsibility to put in place the governing structure around the development of the app was...
Were you explaining to them about all the failings as identified by the Auditor General? Were you explaining to them that we have no contract, we have no budget? Were you giving some indication that this is really falling off the rails? Did you do that?
We were briefing, I'm sure at the time, on the operational requirement to stand up a digitized mechanism.
Did the minister or the Privy Council, the clerk of the Privy Council, ever ask you about costs? Yes or no?
I was not in the role at the time, so I can't speak to that specifically, but I can say that the development of the app and the time pressures and the operational requirements.
It sounds to me, ma'am.
That is the time, Mr. Brock.
Thank you.
I'm afraid. Mr. Brock, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Since the release of the Auditor General report, all that we've heard from the Prime Minister and several ministers is that people need to take responsibility. They've essentially put up a firewall between the government and the federal public service, in particular the agencies that are under fire. Now, to you, Ms. Hogan, the Auditor General, was part of your mandate, did it require you to uncover or ask for documentation to show what level of communication existed between the Prime Minister's office, the PCO, and various ministers that we've heard of today, and their departments?
So our mandate really is to look at how the federal public service takes action once a decision has been made by a government. So in this case, the decision to enact certain border measures, and then how was that operationalized? In the course of doing an audit like that, we might often see briefing material or so on. In this case, because there was such thin documentation, I would tell you that we saw some emails where the deputy minister was being made aware of things at the Canada Border Services Agency, but we saw no formal approval from the deputy there or no formal briefing to ministers. So I can't really speak on what happened between a deputy minister and a minister's
Okay,
office.
and that certainly applies to PHAC as well, that description you just gave?
Yes, we looked for it more at Canada Border Service Agency because they were doing the main contracting
Correct.
and development, yes.
But also PHAC. So, Ms. Jeffrey, I understand you've been in the role as Deputy Minister and President for just 1 year. Your predecessor, who was that?
My predecessor was Dr. Harpreet Kokar.
Okay. And did you consult, for preparing for this particular committee hearing, did you consult with your predecessor on details surrounding the ArriveCan?
No, I did not.
Okay. Was there a particular reason why you didn't?
Because the public servants who are responsible for the administration of this project and the rollout of the app continue to have functions in the department.
Sure, and ultimately, you now, as the Deputy Minister and President, are responsible for the entire department,
Yes.
right? So you're in a position to answer any and all questions.
Yes.
So going back to my earlier round about communications and the frequency, it sounds like the Minister Haidu in particular, the PCO, who ultimately reports to the Prime Minister, were in regular contact with your predecessor and other officials within your department. Now, what I'd like you to produce to us, to this committee, and I'm going to ask it within perhaps 15 days or longer if the chair deems it appropriate, I'd like a calendar or some type of scheduling that would have existed at the time your predecessor was communicating to both Minister Haidu and the PCO. I want to know that frequency. You've indicated that it was fairly frequent. Could have been phone calls, it could have been emails, it could have been actual meetings. I'd like you to produce a schedule of all of those events. Will you do that?
So there was formal governance around the policy of the border measures, and certainly we can document that. But the decisions around the contracting and the governance of the
I'm talking
app
about your
rested with the public
communications. You
service.
must have some type of system that documents when you're going to have a meeting with a minister. That's a pretty important event. You certainly don't just decide at a whim, I'm going to have a conversation, you don't document it. I'm asking for documentation to show the frequency of those meetings to Minister Haidu and the PCO. Will you provide that?
Is there a particular time period that,
I'm suggesting 15 days.
I think Ms. Jeffrey means time period in terms of the
During the entire implementation of the ArriveCan.
there was a formal governance structure around COVID-19. Are you the specific governance structure around the app itself? I'm sorry, I'm just trying to seek clarification about what aspects of the COVID governance structure are being requested.
I'll make it very, very clear. Any and all communications, whether they be telephone, whether they be email, whether they be in person, surely must have been recorded and documented. I'm asking for proof of that documentation during the entire course of the ArriveCan implementation. This was the most pressing issue in your department and to Canadians from coast to coast.
Just hold on. I might have a point of order, Mr. Is it point of order, Ms. Shipp, or
Yeah,
is it?
point of order.
Yes.
This is a really large production request.
So I'm with you. I'm going to let Mr. Brock finish, and then I'm going to interject to try to. I have the same concern you do, Mr. Brock. You got about
this is too
15
much.
seconds left. I'm going to try to help you get through this, but why don't you finish up, and then we'll seek to resolve this.
So that's what I'm asking for. What type of documentation would have existed to record communications between you or your predecessor and Minister Haidu and the PCO?
Okay. Just let me, and Ms. Shipp, if I missed where you are, you can jump in, Ms. Shipp, on a point of order. You're really looking for, I think, you don't want, to Ms. Shipp's point, communications, you want to know when meetings took place between, yes, okay, so let's focus on that. You kind of went out, it sounded like you wanted to go down the same path that Ms. Hogan had gone on by looking through communications, which is very, very broad. You're talking about
Timing.
meetings and who attended them in the departments that are involved. You mentioned CBSA, PHAC, and PCO.
Correct.
Okay. Is that something you'd be able to provide to the committee, the frequency of those meetings and when they occurred?
Yes, the frequency of meetings that occurred with CBSA, Public Health Agency, and PCO in regard to the
Okay.
ArriveCan app, yes.
Thank you. I'll turn to you, Mr. You're good with that? That's, yeah. No, you don't expand it, but go ahead.
No, I just want a
then I-
clarification. Did that include Minister Haidu and the PCO? Your description?
Well, okay, so PCO was mentioned. Ministerial would be different. So I'm gonna let you come back to that because you guys have you have another round. We have agreement on this, Ms. Yip. There is agreement, but you have the floor on a point of order if you like, and then I'm going to turn to you. You'll have the floor after your point of order.
Okay, so, well, first of all.
Is this point of order?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. This is a lot of production
Ms. Yip,
documents.
I will stop. The witness has agreed to provide the documents. Normally, the committee looks for an answer in about 2 weeks, at which point we begin to make inquiries. But it has been agreed to from the minister. So, pardon me, from the witness. So, I need to know what your point of order is.
Oh, well, it would have been better if we could have had this discussion as a committee.
Well, okay, Ms. Yip, you now have the floor for 5 minutes. Over to you.
Okay. Okay, we are over the time at 12.
We are not yet over the time. We started late, and we're still going through it. And it is my intention to get through the full round, which, Mr. Brock, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Scam boondoggle has to have consequences. It's little comfort to the Canadians who are watching this that you're going to do better the next time, that this pandemic was a once-in-a-lifetime issue. You had all the structures in place, and you failed to follow through. Your agency, the CBSA, PSPC, consequences. Apart from Cameron McDonald and Antonio Utano, have you suspended, with or without pay, any of your employees involved in this scandal? Yes or no?
No, there have been no findings of wrongdoing or investigations into Public Health Agency of Canada employees, and no employees have been
Right.
suspended. You
You can only imagine the Canadian taxpayer who are going right now through organizing their taxes, Canadian businesses.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Ms. Khalid.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just trying to figure out how long we are going on
We have-
this meeting.
Yeah,
I do have other
Yeah,
obligations.
I'll
in
answer you.
the next 10
We
minutes.
Mr. Brock and then Ms. Bradford, and then we'll end it for the day.
Okay, thank you so very much. Appreciate that.
And you,
Brock,
and
you
you
have
have a
4 minutes
classic
left.
example how the Liberals want to deflect attention away from this.
Point of order
So
again,
Canadian
Mr.
tax-
Chair.
Okay,
I
hold-
was trying to get clarification. I have other things going on throughout
wasn't a
my
point
day
of order.
to support my constituents. I am so sorry. I don't like to be blamed by the Conservatives for just trying to get to my constituents with a sham meeting that we have had right now.
All right, Ms. Clidd, thank you. Mr. Brock, you have the floor for 4 minutes, please.
Businesses and taxpayers are going through the tax process right now. One can only imagine the consequences to taxpayers and Canadian business owners for the shoddy way that your agency, the CBSA, and the PSPC documented their affairs. There would be consequences. The CRA would be levying consequences, if not calling in the authorities to potentially charge individuals. And all I'm hearing is, sorry, we'll do better. That's not good enough. Someone's got to take responsibility. It's clear you, ma'am, as a deputy minister and the president have to assume responsibility. You suspended nobody other than Cameron McDonald and Mr. Utano for speaking truth to power. Ultimately, the responsibility lies with this government. Minister Haidu, Minister Blair are all responsible for falling asleep
Point
at
of
the
order,
wheel.
Chair.
And the Prime Minister
Point
is
of
the
order,
ultimate
Chair.
person
Just
who's
1 second,
Point of
Mr.
order,
Brock.
Chair.
Ms. Khalid, what's the point of order?
I'm not really sure why we are naming ministers without having any evidence or proof and blaming them for things
Ms. Khalid,
that-
this is
that
not a
they're
point of order.
available for.
There's a thing called ministerial responsibility in this country. You're well versed in it. As to your previous point of order, you can ask your whip or your committee chair, vice chair, where we are in the rotation. Ms. Yip had asked not 15 minutes ago when we were ending it. I was going to, and I told her. So your previous point of order did look like it was interrupting Mr. Brock, as did this one needlessly. Mr. Brock, you have the floor for 3 minutes. You keep interrupting Mr. Brock. I'm going to keep adding time to him so he can collect his thoughts and begin anew. 3 minutes, sir.
You see, Ms. Jeffrey, I won't be silenced. I speak on behalf of Canadians who demand the truth. Do you agree with me that the ministers and the Prime Minister need to step up and accept responsibility for this mess? Yes or no?
The governance of the ArriveCan project was managed within the public service, and as deputy head of the public health agency, I take responsibility for its management.
Ceding my time to my colleague, Mr. McCauley.